Shalom from Yerushalayim. My name is Eli Schlanger, and I'd like to share a Dvar Torah with you about Parshat Korach that we'll be reading in Shul tomorrow. The parasha is about real conflict, and I think that comparing our story with a story at the beginning of the Torah about Cain and Havel, a different story of conflict that actually resembles this one very, very strongly. I think we can glean a lot of insight about conflict, and with the help of Zohar, I'd like also to gain insight into how to resolve conflict and how to appreciate and make room for other people in the world in our engagement with others, and in order to avoid engaging in conflict. The comparisons that we see between Cain and Havel in our story in Korach, once we notice them, are very obvious and striking, but are not so necessarily obvious in the first place. After I sort of figured them out, I also discovered that the Ari of Kabbalistic fame says that Korach is actually a reincarnate of Cain, and this is just a retelling of that whole story. This conflict has been lived before. So the first comparison parallel that I see is in the words Vayikach Korach. What did Korach take? It's left ambiguous in the text, and all of the commentators want to know, what did Korach take? Nobody knows. And at the beginning of the murder, Cain goes out and says something to Havel, but that's ambiguous too. So one thing we see about conflict here often is that, and you've probably experienced this yourself, you're fighting with someone and you don't even remember what you're fighting about. You're just in a conflict situation. That's the first parallel that I see. The next one, once we're there, is obvious, right? We have the familial connection, the brotherly sibling rivalry in Cain and Havel, and here we have the cousins that Korach feels rejected because his cousins, Moshe and Aaron, got the kingship and the high priesthood, and what did he get? He's not so important. So it's a familial jealousy sort of situation. People who are already very close to one another, and it's easy at that point to have conflict. We also see that the Cain and Havel story, the reason Cain gets jealous of Havel is because his sacrifice is rejected, whereas Havel's sacrifice is accepted. And in the story of Korach, that's very similar to the test case, where all of these people come and bring their own incense, and the one that Aaron HaKohen brings is accepted, and theirs are rejected in the same vein, to show God's will and his interest in Aaron HaKohen. The punishment in all these cases anthropomorphizes the Adamah. The land actually rejects or swallows up in the case of Korach, it swallows up the people. In the case of Cain, the land rejects him and will not take him anymore. And it also, right, and the text says that the land opened her mouth to receive your brother's blood, and therefore is rejecting you. And in our case, the land opens up her mouth. At least the technical term that's used, Zufatzar, Tzatpia, is the same as when Moshe says, maybe this will happen, taking it seemingly from the story of Cain and Havel. When it actually happens, Vatiftach ha'aretz, Tzatpia, it's kind of similar, but not exactly the same. Interesting to think about the differences there. And in terms of understanding Moshe's character as well, we see Vayipol Panav, he falls on his face here. And we also saw in Cain and Havel, Cain, Vayiplu Panav, after he gets punished, his face falls, he's so upset, perhaps showing Moshe's deterioration here, that he keeps on falling on his face when he doesn't know what to do. That's what I have for comparisons. I'm sure if you look some more, you'll find some more. I'm totally open. Please leave in the comments if you see any other parallels. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I think the land being anthropomorphized also resembles the story, the Tochacha, the rebuke, where the people are told that the lands will want her Shabbatot, it will want it. That's the sabbatical years, the Shemitah years, like the one we're in now. The lands will desire those years and will spit out, right, reject the people, so that the land can rest. The land wants room for itself in that story as well. We have the Zohar here in Korach says that Korach engages in machloket, which is that he distances and pushes himself away, and it basically discusses a couple of different things. First of all, he pushes himself away from tikkun olam, from fixing the world. People who reject fixing the world are rejected by the world. They're removed from the world. Similarly, he distanced himself from and pushed away shalom, peace, which is one of God's names, and so Hashem gets very upset with him, and he's removed from the world because he's now rejected Hashem, which is right. Just shalom is just one of the names of God, and sort of to expound upon that, it then discusses how the whole world couldn't exist. When God was creating the world, it wasn't going to exist, and then he brought in shalom, and then it could sustain itself. And what was it that allowed the world to sustain itself? It was Shabbat. So here, I think it's important to understand a little bit about Tzimtzum, where we have this concept in Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, where God was creating and creating and creating and creating and creating. There was so much creative energy, it would have never been able to stop. God had to retract himself in some way in order to allow the world to exist. And that is Shabbat. Shabbat is when God stopped and he made room for the world to exist without him, without this constant creative energy happening. Someone who argues against shalom, right? The shalom, which is the Shabbat in that case, but shalom, somebody who engages in this argument that breaks away from shalom, it's the opposite of shalom. He is removed from the world because he has rejected that which allows the world to exist. I hope that's clear. I think that in thinking about our arguments, we can really glean a lot from this understanding about making room, creating this tzimtzum, understanding boundaries between myself and another person, and appreciating that we need to separate and make that right, this boundary, this stopping point, this shalom, like Shabbat, wherein we can make room for the world to exist, make room to fix the world, make room for other people to exist and their opinions. I bless us all that we can engage in shalom instead of in machloket, and that we won't be rejected from the land, and the world will not reject us, because we are not rejecting the world and we are not rejecting other people in it. Shabbat shalom.